It begins at 8:30 Eastern Time Tuesday morning, here on C-SPAN. British voters will go to the polls for a general election on June 7th. Join us now for the BBC's Question Time with William Hague for a discussion with party leaders and questions from British viewers and members of a studio audience.
Tonight, challenge the leader. In Question Time live from Manchester, the Conservative Party leader, William Hague, faces the voters. Okay. All right. Okay. Good evening, and according to all polls, William Hague faces humiliating defeat on June the 7th, but he says he can still win. With 15 days to go, can he persuade voters to come back to the Tories? Tonight, our audience here in Manchester, a cross-section of public opinion, challenge him and his policies. Under the usual Question Time rules, Mr. Hague hasn't been told what questions he's going to be asked, and the first one comes from Graham Hughes, who's in IT support. Mr. Hughes.
The general election is 2 weeks away. Your policies seem unpopular. Your party image is simply dreadful. You're 20 points behind in the polls. What are you going to do about it?
Well, thank you for that very encouraging start. And I do intend to keep working very hard over the next 2 weeks. I don't agree that the policy positions are not popular, because wherever I go around the country, I find that people are feel very let down about the last 4 years. They want to know what the alternative is, and I'm busy setting out the alternative. And the alternative is to hit crime hard, which it isn't being at the moment. It is to sort out the chaos in the asylum system, which it isn't being at the moment. It is to give people back some of the money stolen from them, taken from them in stealth taxes by Gordon Brown. It is to keep the pound, and it is to let the people in our public services actually do their job instead of endless interference and paperwork that prevents them doing their job.
It's a good answer.
That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do.
It's a good answer on policy, but it's not the answer to the question Mr. Hughes asked.
Well, the answer is we're going to present our policy. That is the answer to Mr. Hughes's question. Now, if you're saying, is it possible with those policies, is it possible 2 weeks before an election to win an election, to make sure that we win the election? Well, yes, it is, because I sense around the country that millions of people have not decided how to vote, or indeed whether to vote. They are utterly fed up with the government. They want to hear what the alternative is. They haven't decided what to do. I think that makes the election wide open. And I think people who think it's all over now are being very complacent and very arrogant.
So what is Murray and the other pollsters just asking the wrong people then?
Well, look at the pollsters. Look at the pollsters. Who knows who they are? Look at the pollsters. 2 years ago, we had the European elections. That's the previous nationwide election I have fought as leader of the party. We were miles behind in the polls, much further than we are today. We were even well behind in the exit poll. That was the poll of people who'd been to the polling station. They even said then the Conservatives had lost. What did we do? We won the election. We were 8% ahead of the Labour Party. We doubled our number of members of the European Parliament. So I've defeated the polls before, and I can do it again.
Though Hardly anybody actually voted in that election. It
well,
has to be
10
said.
million people. Wait a minute. 10 million people voted, which is more than in all the opinion polls ever in the history of the country.
What are your own private polls saying?
I don't take many private polls these days.
Do you not do any?
No, I'm
Conservative Party not
certainly
polling?
not going to release them on the BBC.
But you are polling.
But I haven't taken a private poll of the whole country since the campaign began, because I am talking to real people about real issues and not just being guided by opinion polls.
The real woman at the back there.
Do you think that wheeling Margaret Thatcher out yesterday has done you any favours in trying to make up that deficit, William?
She is able to walk. It's not a wheeling. It's not a wheeling operation, exactly. I think former Prime Ministers should say how they want people to vote in an election. John Major will also be taking part in our election campaign. And that's not a bad thing.
Do you think?
Pardon?
Has she done you any favours in trying to make up the deficit in the polls?
Well, I'd rather have her on my side than on somebody else's side, I can tell you.
But
I think that does
you
a
like
lot of
party
good.
leaders taking part, including Edward Heath, who
I'm
said
not
you,
so fond of him taking part. But there we are.
who said you had to fight 2 elections if you were to get back the Tory party.
Well, it's one of those traditions in politics that Ted has a dig at his successors. You're not a proper leader of the Tory party until Ted's had a go at you.
The man in the check shirt there at the back there.
Do you agree with her statement that Britain should never enter the euro? And I stress the word never.
I state the policy for one parliament. I'm against the euro. And I'm standing for this parliament and for the next government. And no parliament can bind its successor. No parliament can say what future parliaments are going to do. So I am stating my policy, one parliament at a time. If people vote Conservative, we will keep the pound. And obviously that means that people who think we should never join, like Margaret Thatcher, support the Conservatives. And it means that people who think we certainly shouldn't join for now support the Conservatives. All those people are brought together behind the Conservative policy.
All right, well, let's hear from Sean Tinsley, who's a finance assistant. Sean Tinsley.
I would never join the euro. Would you?
Well, I can only see one parliament ahead.
Hang on. He said, would you?
I can't see forever into the future.
Well, he can see, but you can't.
Well, I don't know how he sees forever into the future. I can only see one parliament.
Tell us what the reasons are that you won't join the euro in the next parliament.
Well, the reasons I won't join in the next parliament.
Yep.
Well, if it was a vote win, if it's a vote winner, Tony Blair would have adopted it. Don't you worry. The reason we won't join, I won't join in the next parliament, is first of all, it is a huge risk to the economy of the country. For interest rates to be set in Frankfurt, our interest rates, mortgage rates, to be determined in Frankfurt, not in London, could be very bad for British jobs, businesses, and indeed homeowners. Now, there is a second problem, which is the constitutional problem, which is it may well turn out that countries that join the euro lose the right to run their own affairs in many other ways. Now, people say to me, you're wrong, William Hague, you're wrong about that. It is possible to join the euro and keep the right to run your own affairs. And I say, well, let's see then. I won't rule it out forever, but let's see over the next few years what happens to the countries that have joined the euro.
So you're no different from John Major. Wait and see. Don't bind my hands.
No, my policy is not to join in the coming parliament.
Yeah, but that's 5 years. But he says he would never join.
That was not,
you're not saying you would never join.
That was not John Major's policy.
You're not saying you would never join.
I'm not saying, no, very clear. I'm not saying I would
So there are
join.
circumstances when you... Sorry, there are circumstances when you might join.
I'm saying I'm against the euro. But I set the policy one parliament at a time.
No, but can you foresee circumstances in which you might join the euro?
Well, obviously not in the coming parliament.
No, of course not.
So our policy is to keep the pound.
Okay.
And that is the choice. That is the choice in this election. Keep the pound with the Conservatives or lose it under any of the other parties.
What, so that if you lose this election, you think the game's up, you'll accept that Britain's verdict is to go into the euro?
I think it probably is the last chance to save the pound.
Game's up
because
if you
the
lose.
Labour Party have promised a referendum. But they would choose the question. They would choose the timing. They've already rigged the rules of a referendum so that it would go a particular way. So this is actually the last chance to save the pound.
So you're not going to save it for 4 years anyway. What's the point?
This is the last chance to save the
I want to go. No, he's put his hand down. Oh, I'll go to you there.
Given your policy, it seems, which in effect is wait and see, surely it would be better to make a firm mind up. We've seen the problem of Britain waiting on the wings with farming and agriculture and the European policy on that, and how it has been detrimental to Britain. Basically, to me, what you're saying is we're going to wait and see whether it's any good, and then when we decide it's any good, we're actually going to enter not on the terms that we want and then complain about it.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. No. I'm saying I'm against the euro. I think it's a bad idea to join the euro. And therefore, I can commit the next government to not joining the euro. And then I say, well, a lot of people say, you don't have to worry about all the things that you fear about the euro. I say, well, prove it then over the next few years, because I am against joining the euro, and I think we should keep the pound.
Okay, the man in the yellow tie over there.
Mr. Hague, what bemuses me is that you have just made an excellent case for ruling out the euro on principle. Now, I've been a lifelong Conservative. Just a moment, please. I've been a lifelong Conservative, and this time, I'm sorry, but I cannot vote for the Conservatives this time, because your policies are ambivalent. I wasn't going to vote for anybody, as a matter of fact, and it just so happens UKIP are in our constituency now, so I shall have to vote for them. Not only do I want to leave the euro, stay out of the euro, I believe we should withdraw from the European Union completely.
Okay, let's...
Well, let me try to persuade you.
Mr. Hague,
let me try to persuade you.
Let's stick with the euro, because it might come
on
to
the euro. Exactly. Let me try to persuade you. If you vote for a fringe party, or UK Independence Party, whichever party, that cannot obviously win the general election, instead of voting Conservative, given the views that you have, that are obviously closer to the views of the Conservative Party than they are to the views of the Labour Party or the Liberal Party. If you do that, you risk achieving the exact opposite of what you want and bringing in another Labour government, because you will waste your vote on a fringe party, and that would be a Labour government that would sell out more and more of our rights and powers to Brussels and would do away with the pound. So think very carefully about that before you vote for a fringe party.
What I very much hope is that the Conservative Party come to their senses and realise that the vast majority of your activists want the Communities Act repealed. Ted Heath and politicians since then have lied to us.
All right, we'll I promise, come to that point. I want to go to the woman in the third row from the back there.
Surely for such a prominent issue as the euro, the only real answer is to let the public decide and to have a referendum.
This is the referendum. This is the referendum. This is the referendum. Again, it's a very important point. This is the referendum on the euro. Because you will not get a fair referendum. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is.
So
oh, yes, it is. This is the referendum on the euro. Because, well, let me tell you.
No, hold on.
No,
yes,
this is the referendum.
If this is the referendum, then you'll accept the verdict of the British people.
I think this will decide. I think this will decide it. This will decide it.
But, I mean,
no, I'm telling you.
You're a politician who listens to what people say. You're saying that if people put Tony Blair back into number 10, you will accept that the British people want to join the euro.
No, I'm saying that if they put him back into number 10, I'm saying if they put him back into number 10, the pound is almost certainly lost.
You said this is a referendum on it.
Yes, but that is why it's a referendum. Because if they put him back into number 10, the pound is... Let me explain why. Let me explain why. New Labour, as you may have noticed in the London elections last year, is not addicted to fairness in democratic procedures, as Ken Livingstone would tell you if he was here. Their purpose in democratic procedure is to get the result that they want. And they would use the whole resources of government to try to scare people into voting for the euro. They would set the question, they would set the timing. They've rigged it so they can spend twice as much on their side of the campaign as we would be allowed to spend on our side of the campaign. So if Labour win this election, the pound is sunk. Well, and if the Conservatives win the election, the pound stays. That is the simple choice before
the Prime Minister said on Ask the Prime Minister, I don't think you can rig a referendum on the single currency. I mean, do you want to join the single currency or not? Yes or no? That's what he says the question
yes, well, of course he would say that.
Well, what's wrong with that question?
Yes, no, but he would set the detailed question. He would set the timing, and he would use the whole
he'll just say, do you want to join the single currency, yes or no?
And you believe all his promises, do you, David?
Well, we'll hold him to that.
Well, good luck.
Let's take a question from Noreen Napier, who's a teacher.
Yes, can you name a single benefit of our membership of the European Union which we could not have achieved ourselves? And if that is the case, why are you so keen to stay in?
Yes, I can.
We'll come back to this point.
When I was in the last cabinet, I used to go and negotiate with companies to bring their jobs to Britain. That was part of my job. I used to go and negotiate with Japanese, Korean, American companies, persuading them to set up their factories in Britain. And I brought thousands of jobs to Britain, as many ministers have over the years in doing that. Now, I could see in negotiating with those companies that it was very important to them that we were in the European Union, because it gives us access, unrestrained access to the single markets of the European Union. It was also very important to them that we were different from the rest of the European Union, that we didn't adopt every tax and every rule and every bit of regulation and red tape that they have in the rest of the European Union. So it suited them exactly to be in the European Union, but a bit different from the rest of the European Union. And that is the ideal position for this country to be in Europe, but not run by Europe.
Is it your view we'd
never...
ideal position for this country? Do you rule out, you know some of your supporters want, do you rule out ever leaving the European Union?
Well, it's certainly not my policy to leave the European Union.
Just for a parliament, is that?
Well, all our policies are for a parliament. But I can't possibly see that it would be the interest of this country to leave the European Union.
Candidates, Mr. Hague, that
openly want to withdraw from the European Union down south. If you got into Parliament, why wouldn't you have a referendum on that subject of withdrawal?
Well, there are candidates in most parties, a few candidates who want to withdraw from the European Union. And I can take you to a Labour Party candidates who want to do that, plus Conservative candidates. But the choice in the choice in the election is between a Conservative Party that will stop handing over our rights and powers to Brussels and keep the pound, and a Labour Party that will keep handing our rights and powers away. That is the choice. And people have got to make that choice on the 7th of June.
Why wouldn't you offer a referendum on withdrawal from the European Union? There's a whole generation here who's never voted on it. Why shouldn't they have a referendum on that?
Because I don't think that is in the interests of this country. And you cannot...
So you only ask people when you have decided...
I'm not proposing to have a referendum on any of these issues.
This
I'm
election,
saying
you
that
said,
people
was a
should choose a
referendum.
government in which they have confidence to handle these
The man in
issues.
the yellow shirt there.
With respect, I think most people are missing the major issue here. Whilst the euro and monetary union is a massive issue, there are a number of things which have been brought in from Brussels by a tirade, which include agricultural issues, rules on border control, a whole host of other things. And all I can say is I'll definitely be buying me fruit in pounds from now on, Mr. Hague, and I applaud you for it. Well,
okay, right. I think we should keep moving because we've got a lot of questions to get through. Let me take this one from Ben Radford, who is a self-employed builder. Mr. Radford.
Does a supposedly civilized society take people who may be escaping from oppression and injustice and imprison them?
A civilized society looks after them. Civilized society. What a civilized society does is looks after them, welcomes genuine refugees, provides them with healthcare, with housing, with education for their children. That is the tradition of this country. It must always remain the tradition of this country. The tragedy is that at the moment, it is the genuine refugees who are elbowed aside in a chaotic system which has become a multi-billion-pound racket in a trade in human beings. And we have got to bring that to a stop so that this country can help the genuine refugee and not have a system that is so freely abused. And that is why we've got to tighten up on the asylum system. We've got to make sure that when people arrive in Britain, we can process their applications quickly, yes, in a secure reception centre, but quickly, not the 14 months that they have to wait at the moment. And then if they are genuine refugees, they should be welcomed with open arms into this country. But if they're not genuine refugees, then they should not be allowed to remain in the country.
Mr. Radford, do you want to come back on this?
I just feel, I mean, I want to be proud of this country, and I want to feel that we, you know, people who are in these desperate situations are coming over. You're banging them into camps, or you know, holding them, and stopping them from enjoying all the liberties everyone else has. It's just.
Can anyone be proud? Can anyone be proud?
Hold on.
Can anyone be proud?
Treating them all as if they're guilty.
Right? I'm certainly not going to treat them. I'm certainly not going to do that. Can anyone be proud of a system now which is so open to abuse that there is a camp outside Calais, a camp of young men attempting to smuggle themselves into the country because they know it's easier to be smuggled into Britain than it is into other places? Are we proud of that? Are we proud of the fact that that system has produced tragedies such as the 58 Chinese men and women who suffocated to death in a refrigerated lorry because they thought this was a system that you could abuse and you could get in even if you weren't a genuine refugee? Are we proud of that?
All right.
Not at all. We've got to sort this out.
The gentleman here.
Mr. Hague, why do all asylum seekers want to come here in Britain? Why is it Britain? Why not stay Germany, France, or any of the other countries? Why? What is the reason why they want to come here?
Well, it's because of this problem. It is because, for a start, the government, the Labour Party, gave 20,000 asylum seekers a complete amnesty when their applications had not been processed without working out whether they were genuine asylum seekers at all. And that sent out the signal to the world that Britain was not just a safe haven, but it was also a soft touch. And I think it should be a requirement that people fleeing persecution say they are asylum seekers when they reach the first safe country. It is bizarre that you can travel across several safe democratic countries, and then when arrive in Britain say, oh, excuse me, I'm an asylum seeker.
But how can you get to Britain without crossing a safe country? I mean, if you put that policy through,
well, in
anybody, but no plane comes from Afghanistan straight to Britain. No plane comes from Rwanda straight to Britain. Everybody has to go through a safe country.
Oh, really? Oh, David, you are.
No, wait a minute.
You're way out there.
So wouldn't you end up with no asylum seekers
of
at
course
all
we
in
would.
Britain
Of
because
course
they've
we'd
been
not.
through France or Germany or Italy or...
I will tell you, to the immigration officers at Heathrow Airport, a large number of asylum applications arise at airports, arise at Heathrow Airport, for instance, and there is a racket going on where people are told that if they part with their life savings, they can be got into Britain. They're then taken by the racketeer on an aircraft. When they land at Heathrow Airport, their documents are taken off them, and the racketeer flies out on another aircraft, and those people are then abandoned without any documents at passport control. Now, that is what is happening, and they haven't passed through other safe countries.
OK, the woman there.
If you're taking £8 billion pounds from the so-called stealth taxes, where are you going to find the money to build the detaining centres for the asylum seekers?
Well, even the government says that reception centres save money to the taxpayer. They've created one reception centre. There's no disagreement in principle between the Conservative and Labour parties. They also have a reception centre. They've got one at Oakington in Cambridgeshire. And it costs £6 million to turn into a reception centre for asylum seekers. And now they say, the government say, that will save £30 million in benefit costs and in asylum support costs. So even on the government's own figures, having reception centres saves the taxpayer money.
So how many are you going to need to build? How many are you going to need to build?
We think we need to build enough to house about 4,000 to 5,000 people at any one time.
I want to bring in some more people. The gentleman in the second row from the back there.
Mr. Hague, are you aware of the continual Tory half-truths about the so-called problem of immigration and the damage that does to race relations and harbours the innate racism in British society?
I actually have not spoken at all about immigration, except in an interview last week to say that the Conservative Party had no proposals to change our immigration laws, and that we recognise there was a legitimate role for immigration into this country. There is a certain amount of emigration and immigration every year, and that is fine. That is how it should be. We should not be closed off. What I am talking about is abuse of the asylum system. And in my experience, there are many people who've become immigrants to this country, and they've waited their turn, and they've filled in the forms, and they've had to wait often a long time to get their fiancé or a spouse into this country. And they are appalled to see that after they have followed all the immigration rules, quite rightly, other people try to abuse the asylum system. It's the asylum system I want to sort out.
I want now just to get a few points from people. Are you happy with that answer you had? Because you put it as a question. Do you have a comment on it?
Not at all, because the same notions that apply to the problems with immigration, i.e. that the problem is that it's black people that are the problem, are applied to asylum seekers.
That is not the problem.
The same notions are prevalent in each.
As you know, that is not the problem. Asylum is a completely separate issue.
Mr. Hague, let me just take a couple more points, and then you can answer them all together. Yes.
I think the Conservative Party are very much aware of the racist overtones that the policies promote, and I think that's why they do it, to promote and to try and encourage the racist factions within the party, which is a massive proportion, I believe.
And you, sir, down there. Look up.
Mr. Hague, we as Britain have always been a compassionate and tolerant society.
Exactly.
I agree with you. There's no doubt about that. For the genuine asylum seekers, we should give them, they are our guest. Our duty is to look after them while they are our guest, while the Home Office make the decisions. To give you a typical example, I turned up in Liverpool today, and I went to see these 2 blocks of flats where the asylum seekers were there. What I saw was people living, even the rats would have condemned living in them in those conditions. What has happened is the present government, what they've done is they have not really checked out how people are living. They're giving them the full money to them.
Exactly.
But the people who are minting the money are also not only the landlords who are keeping them and taking the money from it, and also the point which you made very, very true, there are a lot of asylum seekers who are bogus in the sense of here only one point, because people are trained abroad what to say when they arrive, so that they get the status in this country while the decisions are... We are a soft touch in many ways. All I want to do in one simple terms is to make sure...
OK, fine.
Well,
I think you get to your point. What do you say to the gentleman?
I think the gentleman here is right. What do I say to the gentleman up here?
Who accuses you of racism and of encouraging it in your party?
I say the British people are not racist. I think the people of Britain are a generous, hospitable, welcoming people. And I think that is what they are. And I think I'm talking about the vast majority of people in Britain. But the vast majority of people in Britain are also appalled that our rules can be so clearly and flagrantly flouted, and that we end up with a situation such as the gentleman over here has just described, which is meant to be humane for people, but is leaving them in appalling conditions and leaving a trade in human beings going on across the world, and I think it's unacceptable.
One more point from the man here in the blue shirt.
Mr. Hague, don't you think it's despicable the way that Robin Cook hijacked race and asylum and combined it together? And actually, it's Labour who are playing the race card and not the Conservatives.
It is exactly right. It is exactly right, because, you know, whenever
Are you agreeing that Labour plays the race card? Is that what you're saying?
The only parties that play the race card are the Labour and Liberal parties, because they don't want to. Yes, they are. Let me explain why. Oh, yes, they are. I know the Labour and Liberal supporters don't like to hear that, but let's tell you why. Because whenever I speak about asylum, I always refer to it in tones and in terms that has nothing to do with race whatsoever. And the only answer you get from the other parties is William Hague's being a racist. And the reason they say that is because they don't want to engage in the discussion about this. They are embarrassed and ashamed about the situation they've produced in this country, and they should engage in a debate instead of hurling abuse at people who bring that debate up.
We must move on. You won't believe it, but we're halfway through our time, so we must move on. Just before I take another question, next Wednesday, we're going to be with the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, in Milton Keynes. And if you'd like to apply to be in the audience there, call this number that's on the screen, 09011 114 411. You can also apply on our website, where there will incidentally be a live webcast at 10:15 following this programme, when a panel of experts will assess Mr. Hague's performance here tonight.
Wow.
And you can take...
these were the experts.
You can take part in that by emailing your questions and comments to questiontime@bbc.co.uk. Right, a question from Ian Guyver.
The timidity of your current spend and tax policies show that, in fact, the modern Conservative Party has accepted the Blairite agenda.
You're accused of timidity in not cutting tax enough. Is that what your question, the thrust of your question is?
It is.
Yes.
Well, this is the opposite way around from the criticism that, of course, a lot of people bring to me.
So what?
They say... But I'm just pointing that out so that the viewers are all clear about that, and I'm pointing it out before you point it out. It is the opposite. Some people say, how can you make all those reductions in taxation? How could you possibly afford it? You're saying, surely you can afford bigger reductions in taxation.
You're wanting to tax a little bit less, and the Labour Party wants to tax a little bit more, but it amounts to an insignificant amount in terms of the amount the government spends. And the Conservative Party won 3 successive election victories talking about...
Were you in favour of what Oliver Letwin said, that they'd reached 20 billion cuts in 5 years?
I think that's a reasonable aspiration.
That's a reasonable aspiration. Why isn't that a reasonable aspiration?
Well, it's not what Oliver Letwin said. And let me explain.
It's what the Financial Times said, he said. Put it like that.
Let me explain. We're talking about 2% of what the government spends.
Yep.
That's a lot of money, actually. It's £8 billion, 8,000 million pounds. And it does enable us to make quite a big difference to the taxes that people pay. For instance, it would mean people didn't pay taxes at all on their savings unless they were the highest rate taxpayers. It would mean 1 million pensioners wouldn't pay tax at all anymore, and all other pensioners who pay tax would have a big reduction. It means married couples with children would be up to £1,000 a year better off, and it means there would be a 27 pence a gallon reduction in the price of petrol. Now, those are not timid things.
Lady Thatcher would have thought them timid, wouldn't she? Lady Thatcher would have thought it timid.
No, well, Lady Thatcher made tax changes, but she made them carefully and in a costed way. And we will do it carefully and in a costed way.
Is £20 billion an unreasonable aspiration? Because you say, and Michael Portillo says, he wants tax to go on down after the 3rd year. Is it unreasonable to think of 20 billion?
Any further aspiration depends on the state of the economy and the amount of money available at the time. So we cannot possibly put a figure on that. Okay. We can say what we will do in the next 2 years. We will save £8 billion of taxpayers' money, and we'll return £8 billion to the taxpayer. And I don't think that's timid. I think that's a very good program.
See, Mr. Hague, you could be a very strong man, not just a timid man, by being honest and saying we're going to ask people for more money because they are so frustrated. The NHS, people throwing eggs because they just can't get treatment, the police who boo and slow hand clap Jack Straw. You get people, they're so frustrated deep inside that they want you to try and change things. And instead of saying to people, we're going to cut money because that's going to get you votes, be honest and say, look, money buys things. I can't go to the shop without money. If I say to him, well, I'm going to cut it down to 10 pence instead of 30 pence.
Okay. This is a very important point.
You made the point. Let him
this
answer.
is a very important point, because people think that. Why don't we just tax people a lot more, and we'd have more money for the public services?
This word tax is a very emotive thing.
But it's
if
what
you would
people
say
have
to
pay.
people that we really just want you to pay an extra pound, or the private men do it.
All right.
Because they get the best
All right,
treatment.
let Mr. Hague answer.
The problem is that, as this government have comprehensively proved in the last 4 years, spending more money on its own does not necessarily improve public services. You know, Tony Blair will go around telling you he spent more on this and he spent more on that. But where are we now? We've got the biggest teacher shortages we've ever had. We've got the morale of the doctors and nurses at rock bottom. The nurses so demoralised the health secretary wouldn't even go and speak to their conference this week. The police so demoralised that they slow hand-clapped the home secretary. Our public services, the morale of the people who work in our public services has never been so low. And that means that the answer is not just about money. It's about how you use the money as well.
But it's also,
and we can use the money that the taxpayer provides far better than we use it today.
It's also about just listening to people.
Okay, fine. We've heard you too. And I go back to... Thank you very much. We'll go to the man at the back there.
Yeah, I think the taxation issue, it's about value for money. I mean, I've seen taxes go up under a Labour government. My view is, what's got better? I think what we could do is the public sector could learn from the manufacturing sector. They've had to reduce costs and take money and take cost out of the business. Why can't the public sector? Why is it always money, money, money?
Are you supporting the original questioner who said that Mr. Hague was being timid in his tax cuts and he should do more?
I think what I'm saying is that it's the way the money is spent rather than just increasing the tax.
He's supporting me, David, but I know you don't want to say
that. The woman here in the third row.
You just said that there's a big shortage in teachers. I'm a trainee teacher. What will you do to increase more good graduates coming into the profession?
Well, what I will do is get the government off the back of the teachers. When I go into a staff room now, I go and visit schools on a regular basis, and I go into a staff room and they say, look at this. And they point to this huge pile of government directives and paper. They got one a day on average last year, telling them to do something different, a whole new load of bureaucracy. I get the same thing in police stations. You get the same thing if you go to doctors' surgeries. And that is what is driving a lot of people out of the professions. You know,
You say bureaucracy, you say administration. Is there something exactly that you're able to get rid of?
well, look at the performance-related pay system that they've just brought in teaching. It is incredibly bureaucratic and time-consuming. It's taken teachers on average about 20 hours to fill in the forms. Then the head teachers had to go over it all again. Then an independent inspector comes in and goes over all of that again. Surely we can have a simpler system of working out things like that. We can have a simpler system.
Are you going to have more teachers?
I am sure that if we let teachers get on with their job and made the sort of changes that I'm talking about, we would retain people in the profession, as well as be able to recruit them. And this is a classic example of how we've got to do it better with whatever amount of money is available.
But you're not committed to increasing the number of teachers. Let's keep with tax.
Certainly intend to increase the number of teachers. That follows from everything I've just been saying.
You don't have a commitment in your manifesto. Labour does.
I have a commitment to do something about it. Labour has a figure. Labour has a figure. They have a figure, they have an artificial figure, which they come out with on a little card at election time, like they did last time. Then it's all forgotten for 4 years, and they think if they come out with it again 4 years later, everybody's going to start believing
Let's stick with
I'm
tax.
actually telling you what I will do.
We'll stick with tax for a minute. I want a question from Joan Lomas, who's a membership advisor for a building society. Joan Lomas?
If you get into power, how can I be sure that the Conservatives will not put up taxes by stealth like the Labour Party?
Well, because of what we've just been talking about, that we have a programme to reduce taxes, and to do that by saving money that the government spends at the moment. And we would do that in several ways. First of all, we would run Whitehall for the same amount we were running it for 4 years ago, which is £2 billion less than today. Secondly, we would crack down on fraud in the welfare system.
But this is a question about stealth tax.
Yes, but
it's not about your tax cuts, which you've explained many times.
But the reason we wouldn't need stealth taxes is because we've shown how we can reduce taxation.
If you don't
and
need
contain
stealth
the government's
taxes, why
expenditure.
don't you say we promise not to increase the rate or range of VAT in that case, which you've been asked all today to do, and all today you refuse to do?
Because we have a plan to reduce taxes.
Well, why can't the words, I promise not to increase VAT or its range...
You don't care those
cross
words
your
out
lips?
of... Let's be clear. Let's be clear about this.
What?
Let us be clear where the parties are on VAT. The Labour Party have not made that commitment on VAT.
But you're all...
I have spent...
They have made that commitment. They made it yesterday.
No, they have not made the commitment on VAT.
Well, they think
they have made a commitment about... They've made a commitment about the scope of VAT. They have not made a commitment about the rate of VAT, which is a very interesting distinction.
Why won't you make that commitment about the rate?
Because we have a programme for reducing taxes. We are
we've
obviously
heard
not
that, but
planning. We are obviously not planning. No, let's be clear about it. We are obviously not planning to increase taxes. We are obviously not planning. We are obviously not planning to raise VAT.
So you have no...
We have a programme for reducing taxes.
So you have no plans to raise VAT?
Of course we don't have any plans
And that
to raise
is exactly
VAT.
the words John Major used before the '92 election, and immediately he got back in.
We have no plans. I'll tell you what we have. We have no plans to raise VAT because we've got plans to reduce taxes. What on earth would we be doing, raising VAT, when we're planning to reduce taxes for the people of this country?
But the trouble with the politicians... The trouble with the politicians from the questioner's point of view is that John Major couldn't be trusted on VAT because he said he had no plans to put it up, and then he did. So you say you have no plans, she doesn't trust you.
But what I'm showing you that I've got is that I have a plan for reducing taxes, which is fine. I'm not saying, just believe me, I'm going to reduce taxes. I'm saying this is where the money comes from. Here is £8 billion of spending changes, and then you get £8 billion of tax reductions. So it's all there spelt out in the print, and it doesn't involve tax increases.
So the tax guarantee is back on the agenda again?
It is a specific programme. No,
right?
you know well what it is.
Sorry, I just said the tax guarantee is back on the agenda.
It is a specific programme of reducing taxes.
Do you want to come back on that point? Then I'm just going around to some other people.
It just gets me. Every time you promise that you won't increase taxes, but everybody always does. They always do it by stealth. And no matter how much you promise, when you do get in, then you'll put them up by stealth, and we're the ones who have to pay. Nobody else takes the buck. You know, you pass the buck, then you'll change your mind and you'll say that, oh, we didn't say that when you get in power.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you about stealth taxes. I hate stealth taxes. I think people have been ripped off right, left and centre.
You're not going to do any stealth taxes if you get in?
We certainly are not going to do stealth taxes.
Okay, fine. Let's
and that's for instance, that's why I want to bring down the cost of petrol. That is the ultimate stealth tax, the most hated stealth tax, and we've got to bring it down.
Okay, well, hang on a second, just with a reminder that you voted for those VAT increases that Mr. Major brought in when you say
I
you're
voted against all
stealth taxes.
Against
we'll
all
go
the
to the gentleman here, and then we'll come to fuel
for the
tax.
last few years.
Mr. Hague, it was your party that brought in VAT on domestic fuel, and it was only when it was going to be increased to 15% and the country kicked up a stink that you then changed your mind. It's also your party that brought in the escalator tax on fuel that we're now all suffering for. Now, in the other breath, you say you're going to bring it down by 6 pence a gallon. You're only giving us back what you've already taken off us.
Well, of course, the whole point.
Shall we go on to fuel tax? I've got a question on that as well.
The whole point of an escalator is when you get to the top, you're meant to get off. And yes, we had a fuel escalator.
Yes.
But that was when our fuel was cheaper than the rest of Europe. Yes. Then our fuel became more expensive than the rest of Europe. What did the Labour government do? They carried on increasing it at a faster rate than any government had ever done before.
To be fair, you actually planned to keep increasing it till 2002.
We did not plan the...
It's in the Red Book. It says, assuming increases 5% above inflation until 2002.
What did Gordon Brown then do? He
came into office and
he speeded up the escalator. More than come into office. Not only did he come into office, he got into everybody's pocket.
Jonathan Word, who's a student. Jonathan Word.
By promising to cut fuel tax by 6 pence, isn't the Tory party showing an ignorance of both economics and the environment?
Right. Well, look what's happened over the last 4 years. Since John Prescott said that it was a terrible thing to drive, he'd drive around in his Jags, but nobody else should drive, and that petrol taxes would go up. And they've gone up faster than they've ever gone up before over the last 4 years. Has the number of car journeys gone down? No, it hasn't. The number of car journeys has gone up by 10% over the last 4 years. So it's not as if increasing petrol taxes has stopped people using their cars. It has simply meant for old people, disabled people, people who need to take their children to school, people who can only just afford a car, it simply meant that they are having to pay through the nose for having to have a car.
So you were all wrong to invent the tax in the first place, invent the escalator, and vote in it in your case in 97 and 98.
It's wrong. And in my case, vote against it in 98 and 99 and last year.
And in 97?
Because it has been taken too far.
And in 97?
There is a difference. There is a difference.
You voted for it?
Yes, but it hadn't gone too far then.
Oh,
it has now gone too far. Well, everybody knows it's gone too far. Why have we got fuel protests last year and threatened again? Because it has gone too far in the last few years. Everybody in the country knows.
OK, let me bring a number of people. A lot of people want to come in. The man in the green shirt here. And I come to you, man, after this.
For the sake of the environment, Mr. Hague, wouldn't it be better to invest more in public transport? Do we need to encourage more people on the roads? The roads are already congested.
Yes. We do need, of course we need to encourage public transport. We need, I'll tell you what we need. We need, in a small and densely populated country for the main part, to encourage and improve all forms of transport. And that includes public transport, but it includes the roads as well. There is no point just trying to drive people off the roads and make it impossible to use the roads. Having a car is part of people's independence. And the big improvement to the environment comes not from preventing them from having a car, but from the big technological improvements in car technology. Car engines these days are vastly less polluting than they were 25 years ago. And that's what's helped the environment more than tax increases.
The woman in the front here.
I live 2 minutes from a railway station. It passes my place of work, which is about 5 minutes up the road. It's a big football stadium in Manchester. Right, it's only got a halt there on match days and it goes into Manchester. Now, why hasn't somewhere like that got a massive railway station? The train I can get from there only goes once an hour. I can get a train from there, and it goes between Earlham and Oxford Road.
He can't do the timetable for you. I don't think,
it just doesn't
What's
go
the point?
anywhere.
The train doesn't go anywhere?
No, not really.
Okay.
So I could get a train and I can't.
Okay, the man in the coloured tie there.
Yeah, you're on about cutting taxes down all the time, but how are you? Do you plan to meet the Police Federation's target of 140,000 police officers, but not just meeting the target as well? There's also the government, the previous government.
I don't think we should get off onto the police because we're on fuel. I think we should stick on the... I mean, I know we're dodging around, but I think we should stick on fuel.
I'm very happy to answer, but we'll carry on
let's
as you
just
wish.
stick on fuel for the moment. You, sir, in pink. We may have a chance to come back to you. You.
Instead of cutting the tax on petrol, why don't you use that money to improve the road system and public transport?
Because people, as the gentleman at the back there said earlier on, people are not getting value for money now from the taxes that they pay. I think people don't mind paying taxes for schools, for hospitals, for roads, for police. They don't mind paying taxes for those things at all. But they ought to get a better service in all those respects for the taxes that they pay today than the service that they receive. And so there are a lot of things I'm going to stop spending money on. I'm going to stop spending money on armies of spin doctors in Whitehall. I'm going to shut the Dome and sell it off straight away and not spend any money. I'm not going to spend 140 million quid in a year on government advertising, because I can tell you if the government has so much of your money that it can afford to spend over £100 million of it advertising to tell you what a good job it's doing, it's got too much of your money and it should give you some money back.
Just another point from the gentleman in the front row, and then the man in the yellow shirt behind him. Very briefly, if you would.
Mr. Hague, I think there are two problems. One is we pay far too much tax, and the second is my 18-year-old son has just started a part-time job, and when he's heard from me that the basic rate of tax is 22 pence in the pound, he's horrified. The government, if you form the government, whatever government it is, should reduce taxes and become more efficient and give better value for money. You all vote to take more tax off us, and it's very easy to do that. But we're the people who pay it. We want better value for money. We want lower taxes.
OK, and the man behind you in yellow. The man in yellow.
Yes, will you actually be matching Labour's public spending plans or not?
I match their plans on health and on schools, and we have no plans to change.
Will the money be the same, or will you be spending more or less?
Well, we'll be spending the same on health, on schools, on police.
That's what they've said.
On the armed forces. The way we change the amount we spend is on these things that I've just been talking about and that other people are drawing attention to. There is a huge amount of waste in government spending. I don't really meet any taxpayers around the country who think that every penny they pay in tax is wisely and carefully spent by the government. And so I say we can get a better value public services from the taxes we pay today, and we can give some of these people, who are not rich people who've paid the increased taxes under Labour, it's poorer people who've paid the increased taxes under Labour, we can give some of them their money back.
Yep, right. Just on fuel, do you give a guarantee not to raise the tax on fuel if you are elected?
Our proposals are for the first year. And that
First
is
year.
27 pence. Well, it's for, we're obviously, our plans are for the first 2 years.
You don't seem to be winning many friends with that reply.
Well, actually, I think I am winning friends. It depends
So
who you're looking at.
a year with sixpence off, and then after that, all bets are
We're
off.
not proposing to return to the escalator.
But no-
We are a tax-reducing party.
right, fine,
we have
but
a
no
programme for
guarantee.
tax reduction. We have some
All right.
specific commitments on tax reduction. We would like to make other tax reductions, but it depends on the state of the economy. at the time.
Kerry Parker is an administrator. Let's have a question from Kerry Parker.
Since Labour sought to abolish the married person's allowance in favour of family tax credit, which has penalised married couples who cannot or do not want to have children, would a Conservative government reinstate this allowance and stop this discrimination?
Married couples who don't have children.
Who do not or cannot have children.
Yes.
I won't reinstate
Which you originally wanted to do, didn't you? You originally said
No, I said we
the
would...
married couples allowance would be reintroduced.
No, you like this misquoting me a little bit. I said we would reintroduce a married couples allowance. And that is what we intend to do. It won't be, let's be straight about it, it won't be for people without children. Because I think that the people who need the biggest help financially are the people who do have children and who need to take time
You are a party.
to look after their children.
You are a party that advocates marriage. We're married. We have the married person's allowance taken away from us. Through no fault of my own, and I am not the only woman in the country, cannot have children. But I am discriminated against because of it.
No, you're right. There will be many people in that position. But in reducing taxes, we've got to try to help the people who need it most. And the fact is that the biggest pressure on the family budget is when you have children. And so we suggest that this allowance, what we're proposing is that this allowance goes to married couples with children under 11. They face the biggest pressure on their family budget. We'd also extend the children's tax credit, which goes to everyone with children, not just the married couples, because they are the people who need the financial help.
What about parents of children under 11 who aren't married?
They would receive the extension of the children's tax credit.
But why don't they receive the £1,000?
Well, because that is
it's £1,000 for a wedding ring, in effect.
Because it is a recognition. It is a recognition of marriage, and I think there should be a recognition of marriage in the tax and benefit system.
Giving us one. You're not giving us one.
I would love it if we. I would love it if we could do it for everybody.
Every party is penalising every married couple who cannot have a child. I accept that every married couple who do have children need help. They need financial assistance, but not at the discrimination of couples who cannot.
We have the point. The man in pale blue there, you said, with the short-sleeved shirt on. Yes.
I'm sorry,
yes.
I've forgotten the question.
I've forgotten the point. Okay, the gentleman here in black.
Yeah, I think taxes as much, I mean, I don't mind that the taxes are stealth or otherwise, but seeing as tax is the nearest this debate's going to get to social security, and having read your manifesto, I want to know why, in the list of the benefits that you're going to give to pensioners, that you haven't mentioned optimising the claim for low-income pensioners to income support.
Always. Of course, you know what happens at the moment?
Well, you haven't mentioned it in your manifesto, Mr. Hague.
Minimum income
and in the list of the benefits you're going to bring to pensioners, that cries out for an ex-social security minister.
Yes, it does. And I pointed this out to Labour ministers in the House of Commons a few
talking
weeks
about
ago,
your manifesto.
That the minimum income guarantee, which the Labour Party have introduced, is not even being taken up by hundreds of thousands of pensioners who are entitled to it, but it's not even being taken up.
So why is it mentioned in the list of the benefits to pensioners in your manifesto that you promise?
Point. Well, we cannot put everything in the manifesto.
Oh, I see.
Because we have many other things. But it is one of the points that we brought.
Because I don't believe you've costed it within your tax plans, because the size of that underclaim in social security, as somebody who used to work in the system, is absolutely enormous. And you don't include that in your tax plans.
It is enormous. I know it well, and it's got to be tackled.
Take 1 point from here.
I think we need to be honest. We can't have decent schools and decent hospitals with reducing tax levels. And the other thing that's a real burden for me... The other thing that's a real burden for me is I'm a married man with 3 children. I would like more taxes, but I don't hear many parties actually talking about our responsibility to the rest of the world and issues of third world debt and actually increasing our overseas aid budget for families who don't have wealth to look after it.
Overseas aid is important.
Not keep it.
Overseas aid is important, and it is on a rising trend, and you'll notice that none of the expenditure savings that I put forward come from overseas aid, because I think it should be on a rising trend. But I want to come back to your point about public services and taxation. Across the world now, our competitors are reducing their taxes. In America, in France, Germany, Italy, even socialist governments in France and Germany are reducing taxes. They're also investing in their public services. But they're reducing their taxes so that jobs and businesses go to those countries. Now, if we don't catch up with them and compete with them, one person's tax rise is going to be another person's lost job in the next couple of years. And that's the importance of reducing taxes in the next few years.
You had your go earlier on. Andrew Thompson, who's a civil servant. I'm sorry. You haven't spoken
No,
yet.
not at
all. All right,
no.
I'll come to you in a moment, if I may. But Andrew Thompson, who's a civil servant. I won't forget you. I'm sorry, I thought you were you man behind. Where's Andrew Thompson? Yes.
Thanks. Mr. Hague, if elected as Prime Minister, what would you do to prevent the early release of criminals from prison? And would you stiffen punishments in order to deter criminals from committing crimes?
Yes. Yes, I would. I would.
Two-part question.
What would I do? I would abolish the special earlier release scheme in the opening stages of a new government. 35,000 prisoners have been let out of prison before they've even served half their sentences. Many of them have gone on to offend again while out on early release. And those are crimes that would not have happened were it not for that early release scheme. So we will abolish the early release scheme in the opening days of a Conservative government, and we will bring in new mandatory sentences for certain offences, such as selling drugs to children, because I believe it's time we hit crime hard in this country, and we haven't hit it anything like hard enough in recent years.
This is a kind of mea culpa, because it was the Tories who introduced, Kenneth Baker as Home Secretary, who introduced the idea of mandatory early release, wasn't it?
This is
the Criminal Justice Act.
This is a different scheme, the special early release scheme that was introduced by the Labour Party. When Jack Straw introduced it, he told the House of Commons that no serious offender would be let out. And actually, they have let out hundreds of very serious offenders, of sex offenders, of muggers, of burglars, of drug traffickers, have been let out of prison under the early release scheme, and I don't think we're going to succeed in fighting crime until we bring that to a halt.
But you want honesty in sentencing, what you call honesty in sentencing, which means no automatic release after half-time or two-thirds of a sentence, which was exactly what the Tories introduced. So it's another of the policies that didn't work.
We introduced it at the end of the last government. And then it was not implemented.
1991, the Criminal Justice Act.
By the last... No, the mandatory sentences, the sharp increase in mandatory sentences was towards the end of the last government.
But releasing people halfway through the sentence was a Tory idea, whose time never came.
These people are now being released well before half their sentence. They're being released before their normal probation date.
Subject of prison sentences, the length of the prison sentence isn't just a matter of deterrence, it's a matter of keeping criminals off the street so that they don't commit more crimes. It's also a case of allowing the police to spread their efforts less thinly because there are less criminals to watch. I think that longer prison sentences are a very practical way of reducing crime levels.
Okay, and I want to bring in this man who I wrongly cut off before. You say.
Okay, I've listened to Mr. Hague for almost an hour now. I think I can sum up your manifesto completely. It's fear, hate, and greed. You've got greed because you want to reduce every tax.
Hold on. Let's hear him. You can't hear if you're all applauding.
You've got greed because you want to reduce every tax. You've got fear because you're scared to death of the euro. And you've got hate because you hate anybody who's foreign or different colour to yourself.
Robbie. Well, I think you must have been listening to a different discussion, actually. And I think you probably thought that before he came in.
Well, have a referendum then if you're
the man on the front here.
think it's about time that everybody recognised that we've paid so much money in tax in the last 4 years. NHS is terrible, public transport is terrible. Whatever Labour are promising is not happening.
That's right.
So you to say over there that things are better. Just because you spend more money doesn't mean it's right. What's wrong with efficiency? Conservative offer efficiency.
Okay.
That's your alternative.
The man at the back with a moustache there. And then I'll come to you, sir, over there.
Mr. Hague, doesn't it boil down to that this British electorate are not going to tolerate another 4 years, 8 years, or even 18 years of Tory sleaze again? We had it all through the 80s,
I have to say.
all through the 90s. We have finished with your sleaze.
Okay.
I have to say.
All right, let
I
Mr.
have
Hague
to
answer.
say. We have, in the government...
Hold on, let Mr. Hague... you have to let Mr. Hague answer.
In the government of Geoffrey Robinson, Peter Mandelson and Keith Vaz, we have the sleaziest government we've ever had. We have a government corrupted by being in power. We have the first government ever. We have the first... No, let me tell you. You asked a question.
Let him
Never
answer.
before have we had a government change its policy because of donations given to the political party in office, as we
10
did
seconds,
in the scandal, in the Formula One scandal under Labour.
I particularly mention the most corrupt minister in recent years, Keith Vaz Crook.
Okay.
Well, there we are. Not fit to be a member of the British Parliament. He should be tried for his crimes.
All right. No, hang on. No, you can't say that. All right. I think we'll ignore those last remarks, and I hope I didn't hear them. It's finish of this programme. I'm sorry. It's all from us this week. My thanks to William Hague. My thanks to all of you here in Manchester. Now, wait. Before we go... Hold on. Before we go, 15 minutes from now, there'll be a special live webcast on the Question Time site, panel commenting on William Hague's performance here tonight. And take part in that, you can email us right now, questiontime@bbc.co.uk, and then watch it later on. Don't forget, watch us next Wednesday with the Prime Minister. See us again then. Goodbye.
Coming up here on C-SPAN, American politics, with the Republican National